Let me tell you something that might get me in trouble with every financial advisor in America. There are situations, real situations, that apply to millions of people where contributing to your 401k is actually hurting your financial future, where every dollar you put in that retirement account is a dollar working against you. And nobody wants to talk about this because the entire financial industry is built on the assumption that retirement contributions are always good, always smart, always the right move. Well, I've been investing for over 70 years now, and I've learned that the words always and never have no place in intelligent financial thinking. Now, before you think I've lost my mind, let me be clear about something. For most people, most of the time, contributing to retirement accounts makes sense. The tax advantages are real. The discipline of automatic savings is valuable. The employer match, when available, is free money you'd be foolish to refuse. But most of the time is not all of the time. And the situations where 401k contributions become counterproductive are far more common than the financial industry wants to admit. Back in 1956, I was running a small investment partnership out of Omaha. I had investors who trusted me with their capital, and I was generating returns that would make most fund managers today weep with envy. Compound annual returns exceeding 20%, sometimes 30%. Now imagine if I had taken that capital that was compounding at 25 or 30% annually and locked it away in a retirement account where I couldn't touch it for decades, where I couldn't deploy it when opportunities arose, where I couldn't compound it at the rates I was achieving. That would have been financial malpractice. The first truth, nobody tells you about 401k plans is what I call the opportunity cost of liquidity. When you put money into a retirement account, you are not just saving it, you are imprisoning it. That money cannot be accessed without penalties until you reach a certain age. It cannot be deployed when a once in a decade investment opportunity appears. It cannot be used to start a business, buy real estate at a discount, or take advantage of market dislocations. You've traded flexibility for tax advantages, and in many cases that trade is a bad one. Let me share a story that illustrates this perfectly in 2008 and 2009. During the depths of the financial crisis, I was able to deploy billions of dollars into investments that generated extraordinary returns. I invested $5 billion in Goldman Sachs at terms that were incredibly favorable. I bought preferred stock in General Electric with terms that most investors could only dream about. I made countless other investments in wonderful businesses at prices that reflected fear, not value. Now imagine an investor who had diligently maxed out their 401k contributions for years. They had accumulated significant retirement savings. But when the greatest buying opportunity of their generation appeared, their money was locked away. They couldn't access it without paying substantial penalties and taxes. They watched from the sidelines as prices recovered and fortunes were made. Their disciplined retirement contributions had actually prevented them from building real wealth because the money wasn't available when it mattered most. The second truth is about something I call the tax deferral illusion. The conventional wisdom says that deferring taxes is always beneficial. You avoid taxes now when you might be in a high bracket and pay them later when you might be in a lower bracket. Sounds logical. But let me show you why this logic often fails. First, nobody knows what tax rates will be in the future. When I started investing in the 1940s, the top marginal tax rate was over 90%. Today, it is around 37%. Tax rates change dramatically based on political decisions that are impossible to predict. You might defer taxes at 30% today only to pay them at 50% in retirement because some future Congress decided to raise rates. The tax deferral that seems smart becomes a trap second, and this is crucial. Many people actually end up in higher tax brackets in retirement than they expected between Social Security income. Required minimum distributions from retirement accounts, pension payments, and other sources. Retirees often find themselves paying more in taxes than they did during their working years. The entire premise of deferral, paying lower rates later, turns out to be false for millions of Americans. Third, The money you contribute reduces your taxable income today, which sounds good until you realize what you've given up. That tax savings today might be 20 or 30 cents on the dollar, but you've locked up the entire dollar for decades. If you could invest that dollar outside a retirement account and achieve returns that exceed the tax savings, you'd be better off paying the taxes now. I ran these numbers recently for a hypothetical investor, a 40-year-old contributing $20,000 annually to their 401k, assuming they're in the 24% bracket. They save about $4,800 in taxes each year. Over 25 years until retirement, that is $120,000 in tax savings. Sounds impressive, but what if that same $20,000 per year invested outside the retirement account in a taxable brokerage generated returns just 2 percentage points higher because of the flexibility to take advantage of opportunities? What if the ability to harvest tax losses, to invest in more tax efficient vehicles to deploy capital when markets crash, added just a small amount of additional return? Over 25 years, that additional return could easily exceed the tax savings from the 401k. The third truth is what I call the fee trap. And this is where the financial industry really doesn't want you to look closely. 401k plans are not free. They come with layers of fees that compound over time and dramatically reduce your returns. Administrative fees, investment management fees, record-keeping fees, and often the worst culprit of all, expensive fund options that underperform simple index funds. I've looked at hundreds of 401k plans over the years, helping friends and family understand what they're actually paying. The average all-in cost is often 1% to 2% per year. That might not sound like much until you understand the mathematics of compounding. A 1% annual fee on a portfolio over 40 years can reduce your final balance by 25 to 30%. You are paying tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in fees over your lifetime for the privilege of having your money locked up. Compare this to a simple taxable brokerage account where you buy low-cost index funds with expense ratios of 0.03%. Yes, you pay taxes on dividends and capital gains along the way, but the fee savings often exceed the tax costs, especially if you are a tax-efficient investor who minimizes turnover and harvests losses strategically. In 1996, I made a famous bet. I wagered that a simple S&P 500 index fund would outperform a collection of hedge funds over 10 years. I won that bet decisively. The hedge funds, with their high fees and complex strategies, couldn't overcome the drag of their expenses. The same principle applies to many 401k plans. The high fees combined with the limited investment options often result in returns that lag what you could achieve on your own with a simple low-cost approach. The fourth truth involves what I call the contribution ceiling problem. 401k plans have annual contribution limits. In recent years, those limits have been around $20,000 for workers under 50, with catch-up contributions for older workers, for high earners. This represents a small fraction of their income. They're being told to prioritize this limited contribution over all other investment opportunities. But here is the problem. If you are a high earner capable of saving significantly more than the 401k limit, the retirement account becomes a small piece of your overall financial picture. You are going to have substantial assets outside retirement accounts anyway. So why prioritize locking up the first $20,000 in a restrictive account when you could maintain flexibility with all of your capital? I've seen this mistake repeatedly among successful professionals. Doctors, lawyers, business owners who max out their retirement contributions first, then invest whatever is left over. They've got the priority backwards. They should be thinking about their total investment strategy holistically, not treating the 401k as some sacred first priority. Let me share another truth that relates to business owners and entrepreneurs specifically. This is the fifth truth, and I call it the business investment paradox. If you are building a business, every dollar you have should arguably be invested in that business during its growth phase. A business you control and understand where your efforts directly impact returns, can generate returns that dwarf anything a 401k could produce. When I was building Berkshire Hathaway, I wasn't socking money away in retirement accounts. I was reinvesting every dollar back into the business, buying more shares when they were cheap, deploying capital into new opportunities. That concentration of resources is what created real wealth. Diversifying into a retirement account would have been diversifying away from my best investment, which was my own business. I know a restaurant owner who spent 15 years maxing out his retirement contributions while his restaurants generated returns on invested capital of over 40%. Every dollar he put into the 401k earned maybe 7 or 8%. Every dollar he reinvested in his business earned 40% or more. The 401k contributions actually slowed his wealth building because capital that could have opened new locations was instead locked away earning inferior returns. Now the sixth truth is perhaps the most controversial, and it involves what I call the behavioral override. The standard argument for 401k plans is that they enforce discipline. People wouldn't save otherwise, so the automatic deductions help them build wealth. They'd never build on their own. And for some people, this is absolutely true. If you have no financial discipline, if you'd spend every dollar you earn, then yes, the forced savings of a retirement plan has value. But here's what bothers me about this argument. It assumes permanent incompetence. It assumes you will never develop the discipline to save and invest on your own. It treats you like a child who can't be trusted with their own money. And for many people, this assumption is wrong. They could develop financial discipline. They could create their own automatic investment systems. They could maintain the flexibility of accessible capital while still building wealth consistently. I've always believed in treating investors as capable adults. The financial industry treats them as incompetent children who need to be protected from themselves through restrictive accounts and limited choices. If you have the discipline to invest consistently, regardless of the account type, you don't need the handcuffs of a retirement account. You can achieve the same savings discipline while maintaining full flexibility. The seventh truth relates to the early retirement problem. More and more Americans are discovering that they don't want to work until 65 or 70. They want to achieve financial independence earlier to have options to control their time. But 401k money is specifically designed to be inaccessible until traditional retirement age. If you want to retire at 50 or 55, your retirement accounts become a problem, not a solution. Yes, there are strategies like Roth ladders and substantially equal periodic payments that can provide earlier access. But these are complicated, restrictive, and don't provide the true flexibility that accessible capital provides. People who achieve early financial independence typically do so through taxable investments, real estate, business ownership, other assets they can access freely. Their retirement accounts often become the last money they touch, not the foundation of their financial independence. Now, let me tell you about the situations where I believe 401k contributions should be reduced or stopped entirely. First, if your employer offers no match, the primary advantage of workplace retirement plans disappears. You are left with tax deferral, limited investment choices, and restricted access. In many cases, you'd be better off investing in a taxable account or even a Roth IRA where you at least have more investment options and more flexibility. Second, if you have high interest debt, every dollar of retirement contributions is a dollar that is not paying down that debt. Mathematically, paying down debt at 8 or 10 or 20% interest is often a better return than any investment, especially a tax. Advantage return, the financial industry says to always get the match and then pay down debt. I say look at the numbers for your specific situation and make the decision that maximizes your wealth, not the decision that follows conventional rules. Third, if you have a genuine high return investment opportunity, whether that is your own business, a real estate investment you understand well, or a market dislocation that presents bargain prices, having your capital locked away is actively harmful. Flexibility has value, optionality has value, and retirement accounts eliminate both. Fourth, if you are in a low tax bracket now and expect to be in a higher bracket later, Traditional 401k contributions make no sense. You are deferring taxes at a low rate to pay them at a higher rate. This happens more often than people realize, especially for young professionals early in their careers who will earn much more later, or for people in temporarily low-income situations. Fifth, if your 401k plan has poor investment options and high fees, you might be better off investing elsewhere. I've seen plans where the cheapest option was still charging 1% per year in expenses. Over a career, those fees represent a massive drag on returns that often exceeds any tax benefit. Let me give you a framework for thinking about this decision. Calculate the true benefit of your 401k contribution. That means accounting for the employer match, if any, the tax deferral, the fee drag, the opportunity cost of lost liquidity, and the probability that your future tax rate will differ from your current rate. Then compare that to the alternatives, whether that is a Roth IRA, a taxable brokerage account, paying down debt, or investing in other opportunities. For many people, especially those early in their careers with low incomes and long time horizons, retirement accounts still make sense. The tax deferral compounds over decades, and the employer match provides an immediate return. But for others, especially high earners with no match, people with excellent investment opportunities elsewhere, people planning early retirement, or people in plans with high fees and poor options, the 401k might not deserve its sacred status. I want to share one more story that brings this all together. I know a family where the husband worked for a large corporation with an excellent 401k plan. Good matching, low fees, solid investment options. He maxed out his contributions every year. His wife ran a small business that generated returns on capital of over 30% annually, but they treated all their money as household money. So her business was often starved for capital while his paycheck funded retirement contributions. When I looked at their situation, the math was clear, and each dollar that went into the 401k earned 80% net of fees. Every dollar that went into her business earned 30% or more. By prioritizing retirement contributions, they were systematically choosing the inferior investment. Over 10 years, this mistake cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars in foregone wealth. The solution wasn't to stop all retirement contributions. The match was still valuable, but they needed to size the contributions to take the match and invest the rest in the higher returning business. Once I showed them the mathematics, they were stunned that they'd followed conventional advice for so long without questioning it. This is what I want you to take away from everything I've shared. Question the conventional wisdom. Run the numbers for your specific situation. Don't assume that what is generally good advice is specifically good advice for you. The financial industry promotes 401k contributions because it benefits them through fees and assets under management. But the best advice for you depends on your tax situation, your investment opportunities, your timeline, your employer's plan, and dozens of other factors that generic advice ignores. I've built my fortune by thinking independently, by questioning assumptions, by looking at the actual mathematics rather than accepting conventional wisdom. I've never followed the crowd. I've never assumed that popular strategies were right just because they were popular. That independent thinking is what I am encouraging you to apply to your own financial decisions. The 401k is not sacred. It is a tool, like any tool. It is useful in some situations and counterproductive in others. The wisdom lies in knowing the difference. And that requires you to look at your own numbers, understand your own situation, and make decisions based on reality rather than rules of thumb that may not apply to you. So the next time someone tells you to max out your 401k without question, without analysis, without considering your specific circumstances, remember what I've told you today. There are situations where that advice is costly. There are people for whom retirement contributions are actively harmful to their wealth building. And the only way to know if you are one of those people is to do the work, run the numbers, and think for yourself. That independent thinking, that willingness to question conventional wisdom, that insistence on understanding the mathematics of your own situation rather than following generic rules. That is what separates investors who build real wealth from those who follow the crowd into mediocrity. It has served me well for 7 decades, and I believe it will serve you well too. The truth about 401k plans is more nuanced than the financial industry wants you to believe. Sometimes they're excellent vehicles for building retirement wealth. Sometimes they're traps that limit your flexibility and reduce your returns. The wisdom is in knowing which situation applies to you and having the courage to act accordingly, even when it means going against the conventional advice that everyone else is following. But I want to go deeper on some of these points because I don't think I've fully explained the magnitude of what is at stake. Let's talk more about the opportunity cost of locked capital, because this is something most financial advisors completely ignore when they give you blanket advice to maximize retirement contributions. In my career, the biggest returns have always come from being able to act decisively when opportunities appeared. In 1973 and 74, the stock market crashed. Wonderful businesses were selling for prices that made no sense. But to take advantage of those prices, you needed available capital. You needed money that wasn't locked away, money you could deploy immediately. The investors who had flexibility made fortunes. The investors whose money was inaccessible watched from the sidelines. The same pattern repeated in 1987 after Black Monday. It repeated in 2002 after the dot-com crash. It repeated spectacularly in 2008 and 2009. Every decade seems to bring at least one moment where having accessible capital is worth far more than any tax advantage. And if your money is locked in a retirement account, you simply cannot participate when these opportunities arise. Let me give you some specific mathematics to illustrate this. Say you are 40 years old with $300,000 in retirement accounts and $50,000 in accessible savings. A market crash occurs and wonderful businesses are selling at 50 cents on the dollar. You can only deploy your $50,000 in accessible funds. The $300,000 is trapped, earning whatever the market does, unable to take advantage of the dislocation. Now imagine the opposite scenario. You have 50,000 retirement accounts and 300,000 accessible. The same crash occurs. You can deploy the 300,000 into bargains, even if you just match the market's eventual recovery. You've made far more money because you had more capital available when it mattered. And in my experience, patient investors who buy during panics often beat the market's recovery by substantial margins because they're buying at distressed prices. This is not theoretical. I've watched this play out repeatedly over 70 years. The investors who maintain flexibility, who keep substantial capital accessible, consistently outperform those who maximize tax-advantaged retirement contributions, but sacrifice liquidity. The tax savings are visible and easy to calculate. The opportunity costs are invisible, but often far larger. Let me address another aspect of the fee problem that I only touched on earlier. It is not just the explicit fees that hurt you in 401k plans. It is also the implicit costs of limited investment options. Most plans offer maybe 20 or 30 fund choices. Many of those choices are expensive, actively managed funds that underperform indexes. Even the index options are often more expensive than what you could buy on your own in a taxable account. But the bigger issue is what is not available. In my taxable accounts, I can buy individual stocks when I find compelling opportunities. I can invest in Berkshire Hathaway directly, which charges no management fees whatsoever. I can purchase bonds at prices I negotiate. I can invest in private deals and partnerships. I can hold cash when markets are expensive and deploy it when prices fall. A 401k gives you none of this flexibility. You are limited to the menu your employer has chosen, and that menu is often mediocre. I've looked at plans where the best available option was an S&P 500 index fund charging 30 basis points per year in a taxable account. You can buy essentially the same fund for 3 basis points. That 27 basis point difference might seem trivial, but over a 40-year career, it reduces your ending balance by roughly 10%. That is tens of thousands of dollars lost to unnecessary fees. And it is in addition to all the other fee drag in these plans. Now let me talk about something even more important, which is the psychological impact of accessible versus locked capital. When your money is accessible, you think about it differently. You are more engaged, more attentive, more likely to make intelligent decisions because you can actually act on your insights when your money is locked away. There is a tendency toward passivity, toward set it and forget it thinking that may not serve you well. I've never believed in passive investing in the sense of not paying attention. I believe in patience, absolutely. I believe in long-term thinking, certainly, but I also believe in active engagement with your investments, understanding what you own, monitoring conditions, being ready to act when circumstances change. Retirement accounts tend to encourage disengagement because there is nothing you can do anyway. Your money is locked up, the investment options are limited. So why bother paying attention? This psychological shift can be costly. Engaged investors make better decisions over time. They rebalance appropriately. They adjust allocations as circumstances change. They take advantage of opportunities within their constraints. Disengaged investors often end up with portfolios that drift into inappropriate allocations, that miss opportunities for tax loss harvesting or rebalancing, that simply underperform because nobody is minding the store. I want to address the Roth versus traditional debate as well, because it is relevant to this discussion. Roth retirement accounts, where you pay taxes now and withdraw tax-free later, have different mathematics than traditional accounts. In many cases, especially for younger investors in low tax brackets. Roth accounts make more sense than traditional 401k contributions, but even Roth accounts share the fundamental limitation I've been discussing. The money is still locked away. You still can't access it without penalties until retirement age. You still have limited investment options within the plan. The liquidity problem doesn't disappear just because you've solved the tax bracket problem. If I were advising a young person today, I might suggest a hybrid approach. Get any employer match available because that is free money. Consider Roth contributions if you are in a low tax bracket. But don't neglect taxable investing. Build a substantial pool of accessible capital that gives you flexibility. The optimal split depends on your specific circumstances, but I'd be very wary of the advice to maximize retirement contributions at all costs. Let me share something about my own approach that might surprise you. Throughout my career, I maintained substantial liquidity. Even as Berkshire grew to enormous size, I always kept significant cash reserves. People criticize this as a drag on returns, and in good years it probably was. But that liquidity gave me the ability to act when opportunities appeared. It allowed me to make deals when credit markets froze. It provided the capital to buy when others were forced to sell. The same principle applies at the individual level. Having accessible capital, even if it means forgoing some tax advantages, gives you optionality. Optionality has enormous value, especially in a world where market conditions change unpredictably and opportunities appear without warning. By maximizing retirement contributions at the expense of taxable savings, you are minimizing your optionality at precisely the time of life when you should be maximizing it. Here is another consideration that rarely gets discussed. What happens if you need money before retirement? Life is unpredictable. Job losses happen. Medical emergencies happen. Opportunities happen. If your wealth is concentrated in retirement accounts, accessing it in an emergency means paying penalties and taxes that could consume 25% or more of what you withdraw. That is a terrible outcome. Yes, some retirement plans allow loans or hardship withdrawals, but these come with restrictions, limitations, and often unfavorable terms. Having accessible taxable investments gives you a buffer against life's uncertainties without the penalty of early withdrawal. It is a form of insurance that has real value that is easy to overlook when everything is going smoothly, but becomes critically important when challenges arise. I've seen families devastated by having too much of their wealth locked in retirement accounts when unexpected needs arose. They had assets on paper but couldn't access them without severe penalties. The discipline of retirement saving had become a trap. They would have been better served by a more balanced approach that maintained accessibility alongside tax-advantaged saving. Let me also discuss the impact on estate planning, because this is another area where 401k accounts can create complications. Traditional retirement accounts are subject to income tax when inherited by non-spouse beneficiaries. Your heirs receive the money, but they also receive a tax bill that can consume a substantial portion of the inheritance. Recent changes in tax law have made this even more problematic by requiring most non-spouse beneficiaries to empty inherited retirement accounts within 10 years, potentially pushing them into higher tax brackets. Contrast this with appreciated assets held in taxable accounts, which receive a step up in basis at death. If I hold stock that I bought for $10 and it is worth $100 when I die, my heirs inherit it with a basis of $100. They owe no income tax on the $90 of appreciation. That is an enormous advantage that retirement accounts don't provide. For investors focused on building generational wealth, this difference matters significantly. Taxable investments can pass to heirs more tax efficiently than retirement accounts in many cases. By overemphasizing retirement contributions, you might be optimizing for your own retirement while creating tax problems for your children and grandchildren. I want to close with a challenge. Take your 401k statement and calculate what you are actually paying in fees. Include the expense ratios of every fund you own plus any administrative fees charged by the plan. Compare those costs to what you'd pay investing the same money in low-cost index funds in a taxable account at a discount brokerage. The difference might surprise you. Then think about your liquidity. How much accessible capital do you have outside of retirement accounts? If an opportunity arose tomorrow, a chance to invest in a business you understand, a market crash that put wonderful companies on sale, a real estate deal at a distressed price, could you act? Or would you have to watch from the sidelines because your capital is locked away? Finally, run the numbers on your tax situation. Are you actually saving taxes through deferral? Or are you just postponing a tax bill that might be larger in the future? What is your current marginal rate versus your expected rate in retirement? Does the math actually support the conventional wisdom in your specific case? These questions don't have universal answers. They depend on your circumstances, your opportunities, your tax situation, your timeline. But they're questions that most people never ask because they've been told to just maximize retirement contributions without thinking. That lack of thinking, that blind following of conventional advice, is what separates average financial outcomes from exceptional ones. I've built substantial wealth by asking these questions, by challenging assumptions, by running the numbers rather than following rules of thumb. That approach has served me well, and I believe it can serve you well too. The 401k is a useful tool for some people in some situations, but it is not a sacred cow that should never be questioned. Question it, analyze it. Make the decision that is right for your specific situation, even if that decision goes against what everyone else is telling you to do.